In Zimbabwe, where I had my formative years, so that's to say I was born there and lived there until I was 12 years old, we always heard Shakespearean lines or Shakespearean words spoken without realizing that they were actually Shakespearean words and Shakespearean lines. So all that glitters is not gold is something that, we would say. Constant as the northern star is something that we would say. To be or not to be is something that we would say, because our culture, our Zimbabwean culture, is so full of proverbs and words and exciting wordplay. So we grew up around that. And I have to say that it's only years later that I realized that a lot of what we were speaking as young children was actually Shakespeare. And then, of course, Romeo and Juliet is something that we did at school very early on. And I fell in love with the story of these two young people who were just like myself, young and growing up. I think it starts off very simply. It starts off with someone returning. So I think as an audience, we then think, well, just naturally, where has he been and what has happened since he's gone? And then we find out you have a king who has been killed by his brother so that the brother can take over the kingdom. But we find out in many different ways. So there's a spiritual finding out. The ghost comes. Something unexpected, something from the other realm. And then there's also reason, Hamlet seeing things for himself. And then Hamlet encountering each person who he left behind, because he's been somewhere else. So, there's a Polonius who has his own motives and his own family. You have his mother who has her own motives and has made certain decisions. You have the uncle who has his own motives and has made certain decisions. You have the threat that perhaps something from outside will happen to the country. Hamlet is shocked that his mother didn't know that his uncle killed his father. He doesn't sort of believe it. And when he believes it, when he really begins to understand that his uncle killed his father and married his mother, he really takes it to his mother and says, why do you not see that this person has done this? And why are you married to him? And why do you settle for someone who is this person compared to your husband? He really finds it shocking that his mother not only marries his uncle, but that she doesn't seem to be useful or helpful in setting things right. And then we get to see Hamlet try to fix what has happened. And then we see how things go wrong. And then finally, we are given an opportunity to start again at the end of the play. So that's how I see the storytelling, and I think it's beautifully done. I think it tells us things of the present, of the past, of what happens when we die, of what it means to be alive and to fight for the things that you believe in. So there are many different tribes in Zimbabwe, and the Shona people are the largest. And their beliefs about death are very, very specific. A bad death is described as something that has happened to the deceased that someone else with evil intent or other intent, well, evil intent, has done to cause that death. And in Hamlet, you have a king who has been killed by his brother so that the brother can take over the kingdom. And that is a bad death because no one has the right in Shona culture to take another person's life. And it's particularly a bad death because until that has been set right, until this person has actually been punished for what he has done, the other person cannot rest well. And actually in Hamlet, the ghost does say he cannot rest in peace until his death has been revenged. In Shona culture, it's just the same, so that the dead person cannot become an ancestor if there's unfinished business, which is that the person who's made him die has to be punished. And one of the things I find fascinating about Hamlet is how he's viewed as someone who takes too long to do what he does. Because I think he takes just the right amount of time, because about a third of us, a third of Zimbabweans, live outside of Zimbabwe because of many different reasons. And so we often find young men coming back home at the death of a parent, at the death of a grandmother, because they study elsewhere, we work elsewhere, we rely on being outside of Zimbabwe to make a living and to contribute to our families. So when you come back, it is highly inappropriate to do anything too quickly, because you need to know what has been happening when you are not there. And certainly that's my experience, going back to Zimbabwe and having to find out exactly how my father died. And this has happened to me. What happened, hearing the story of what happened and who was there and what then happened, and how can I, as a son, start to put things together so to pay off those people perhaps who looked after him, or to do the work around his death. So I think when Hamlet comes back to Denmark and sees the ghost of the father, and then has to really think, he has to be methodical about what happened, what exactly happened. He has to try and understand it before he does anything else. And so the fact that in the Western world, his taking of the time is viewed as a problem. In fact, I've had many actors say, why doesn't Hamlet just kill his uncle? And my thought as a Zimbabwean person, is to say, he has to find out what happened. And in Hamlet, of course, the way he finds out and how he finds out and when he finds out, and then how he then goes about setting things right is what makes the play so beautiful, I think. And I think I have that particular view of it because of my background and where I come from. So we performed Hamlet in Zimbabwe, but we also performed it in South Africa. And I think in Zimbabwe, they were so enchanted by the fact we began the show with a funeral procession, which was not specific to any character, but because we wanted to talk about death. So we started off with a very, very famous folk song, which is sung at funerals. So it put everyone in the zone, in the mood to think about death. And as the character of Hamlet started sort of going through the process of finding out what happened to his father, the audience were slowly beginning to see the reality of what is at stake. So they began to really see how evil, if you like, Claudius is. And so the audience were responding to all of these little Shona culture things that we had inputted into the production. When Hamlet was questioning his mother in the bedroom, the audience were just open-mouthed. They agreed. They go, those sounds that they make. Oh, just that sense of shock that you get with the Shona audience. Oh. And, I was playing Gertrude, and Hamlet is saying to her, and you use this bed. And the audience just go, because they suddenly see it. And that's the genius of Hamlet, because if you don't see the horror of what's happened, you don't understand it.